I was driving home from work when the snowstorm hit. It was the worst one I had ever seen, and I could barely see the road ahead of me. The wind was howling, and the snowflakes were like needles on my skin. I turned on the radio, hoping to hear some news or advice, but all I got was static. I decided to take a shortcut through the woods, hoping to avoid the traffic and the worst of the storm. I knew the road well, as I had driven it many times before. It was a narrow, winding path, surrounded by tall pine trees. It was usually peaceful and scenic, but now it looked like a scene from a horror movie. I drove slowly and carefully, trying to avoid any obstacles or slippery patches. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. I felt isolated and anxious, wondering if I would make it home safely. I thought of my wife and kids waiting for me at our cozy cabin. I hoped they were okay, and that they had enough food and firewood. I was about halfway through the woods when I saw something that made me stop. It was a car, parked on the side of the road. It looked like it had skidded off the road and hit a tree. The front of the car was smashed, and the windows were shattered. There was blood on the snow and a trail of footprints leading away from the car. I got out of my car, feeling a surge of adrenaline. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and followed the footprints. They led me deeper into the woods, away from the road. I wondered who had been in the car and where they had gone. Were they injured? Were they looking for help? Or were they running from something? I called out loud, "Hello, is anyone there? Do you need help?" But there was no answer. The only sound was the wind and the snow. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I wished I had stayed in my car, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to find out what had happened. I walked for about 10 minutes until I reached a clearing. There was a small cabin in the middle of it with a light on in the window. I felt a flicker of hope, thinking that maybe the person from the car had found shelter there. I approached the cabin and knocked on the door. There was no response. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I tried the door handle and found it unlocked. I opened the door and stepped inside. The cabin was warm and cozy, with a fireplace and a sofa. There was a table with a half-eaten meal on it and a bookshelf with some books and magazines. It looked like someone lived there, or at least visited regularly. I called out again, "Hello? Is anyone here?" But there was no reply. I walked around the cabin, looking for signs of life. I checked the bedroom, the bathroom, and the kitchen, but I found no one. The cabin was empty. I was puzzled and frustrated. Where was the person from the car? Had they been here and left? Or had they never made it here? And who owned this cabin? I decided to wait for a while, hoping that someone would show up. I sat on the sofa and picked up a magazine from the table. It was a travel magazine with pictures of exotic places and adventures. I flipped through it, trying to distract myself from the storm and the mystery. I was about to put the magazine down when I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me with my wife and kids smiling and posing in front of our cabin. The caption read, "Meet the Smiths, a happy family who loves to spend their weekends in their cozy cabin in the woods." I dropped the magazine and felt a wave of nausea. How was this possible? How did they have a picture of me and my family? And why was it in this cabin? I looked around the cabin and noticed something else. There were pictures of me and my family on the walls, on the mantle, and on the fridge. There were also pictures of the person from the car, alone or with other people. Some of them looked familiar, but I couldn't place them. I realized that I knew the person from the car. It was me. I felt a sudden pain in my head and a flash of memory. I remembered driving home from work and taking the shortcut through the woods. I remembered skidding off the road and hitting a tree. I remembered getting out of the car and walking into the woods. I remembered finding this cabin and going inside. I remembered killing the people who lived here and taking their place. I remembered doing it many times before, with different people in different places. I remembered that I was a serial killer who liked to steal other people's lives. I remembered that I had a family who didn't know the real me. I remembered that I had to go back to them and act like nothing had happened. I remembered that I had to do it again and again and again. I remembered that I enjoyed it. I remembered everything, and then I forgot. I picked up the magazine and saw a picture of me with my wife and kids smiling and posing in front of our cabin. I smiled and thought, what a happy family we are. I got up and walked out of the cabin. I followed the footprints back to the car. I got in and drove away. I drove home to my cozy cabin where my wife and kids were waiting for me. I drove through the snowstorm and forgot everything.